The number one thing that you can do is to put in boundaries so that you don't have to feel and wear other people's emotions. And in this episode, I'm going to show you guys how to put in these boundaries. Being an Australian and knowing that there's tall poppy syndrome out there, and also knowing that it exists in America as well, people just don't label it as tall poppy syndrome. There is this epidemic of it happening, especially with Gen Zs, but it's been filtered from the boomers, where essentially people just don't know how to put in good boundaries, and because they don't put in boundaries, their magnetism to attract what they want in life just really quickly starts decreasing. And essentially the more that they don't put in boundaries, the more that everything in life feels like you're forcing it. Your relationship feels hard, your business feels hard, everything that you're doing just feels challenging and difficult, and we want to completely remove that. So I've created a 3-part series on how to insert boundaries, and we will be diving deeper in this in my men's group online community called Set to the Standard, where we essentially teach people to become the most magnetic person in any room that you walk into with social skills. And one of these social skills is putting in boundaries. So let's get straight into it, guys. So it's like, where do boundaries come from and why do we even need boundaries? Well, firstly, if we're not putting in boundaries, people will walk all over us, and then we essentially won't have any time at all in our lives to do anything that we want or find any enjoyment. And that's when we become nice guys, people pleasers, a person that's doing everything for everyone else, and then we figure out and look back and go, wow, look at all these people achieving these great things and having these great experiences, and where's my turn, right? So without boundaries, you become invisible because you put in way too much effort. Everything feels like you're forcing it. You notice other people with half your skill or half your age are doing better than you. You become addicted to dopamine and you end up feeling like you're burning out all the time. That's essentially what happens if you don't have any boundaries. And you can get really angry and frustrated at people, right? So where they come from is, it just comes from trauma. It just comes from how we were raised as a kid and our perception of how we were raised. Because sometimes we can look at this and go, oh, I got this from mum, this from dad, blah. And however, when you have that conversation with your parents, if you're willing to have that conversation with your parents, it can be a little bit sticky. And instead, if you think about it of, oh, my parents did give me love, they tried the best that they could, but it was my perception as a kid which formed my reality for what I see the world as it is now. And most of the time that isn't in boundaries. So what I've done is I coach a lot of men on this. So in my practices, I help coach men to basically be the most confident person that they can, become extremely magnetic in business. And the things that get in the way is relationships, is a poor health or healthy habits, and it just basically all compounds without having clear boundaries. So essentially, a child that has been raised with healthy boundaries had parents who asked for permission before intervening in personal matters. So the example that I like to use is when you ask a kid, hey, it's cold outside, can you please put your jumper on? And they say no. You say, oh gosh, this kid is going to be cold outside, you have to put this kid's jumper on. Then you just say, oh look, come here. And you just put the jumper on the kid, and then the kid disassociates and goes, and it's like the jumper's been put on them, even though they've just said no. That way the parent hasn't respected their boundaries. Even when you knock on the door to enter their room when you need to, it's like, hey, can I come in your room? And they say, no. And then you just go, well, screw this, and you open the door anyway. The kid's like, oh, my privacy has been invaded. So obviously there's times where you have to, as a parent, be very diligent with how you ask, because you have to go in their room or something. So there's definitely ways to move things around to make sure that you can reduce that as much as possible. But the children who have been exposed to being asked for permission first, who have really healthy boundaries, are the ones who don't have anxious attachment, they don't have avoidant attachment. Their boundaries are really crystal clear, and it's a lot easier for them to feel fulfilled in life and have meaningful relationships and actually be a good leader in business, right? So they also had personal space, so their room and their belongings and their emotions were acknowledged, not just the only time that they were acknowledged was when they won or did good grades. They had a say in decisions after affecting them, so choosing what to wear, expressing their emotions without dismissal. So they actually had a say in decisions where they were like, you know, feeling sad about something, and it's like, well, what would you like to do? Same thing if you're knocking on the door and it's like, hey, well, I have to come in because of this and this reason. What would you like to do? You know what I mean? And then the kid would say, well, in 5 minutes, whatever. As long as they mainly get a chance and get a say is extremely important. Children raised with unhealthy boundaries, a little bit different. They had their autonomy frequently overridden. So that's like the jumper thing. Forced to wear the jumper. Forced to eat something that they need to eat. They experience frequent interruptions and invasions. So like entering their rooms without knocking, speaking over top of the kids. Do as I say, not what I do type of attitude. Were manipulated into compliance. They were guilt tripped, or they were guilt tripped for having preferences or for saying no. That's one thing that I felt a lot of with my parents was, it was just like, why is there any time that I say no, I feel guilty? So now we come into the real world where you're leading a business, you're running a business, you're running workshops, your retreats, you're doing personal development with people. This is what I do for mine. I'm doing personal development with people. People say no, they reject me. I'm on sales calls, I get rejected, and my whole nervous system just goes, that's really jacked up. And I was like, why is that? And it's like, well, I always felt guilty every time I said no to my parents. And they still do guilt trip me for that. When I say no sometimes, oh, well, you don't do this for your parents, and vibe is what I'll get sometimes, and I just look and smile. These experiences shape how adults set and respect boundaries in relationships, workplaces, and friendships. Very interesting. The 4 nervous system responses to boundary violations. So this is what happens when you get your boundaries violated, essentially. It's a crazy word to say, but it's true. You freeze, you flight, you fight, and you appease, right? So with the freeze, essentially you disassociate. Everything just becomes, ooh, I need to freeze right now because if I move, danger. 2 is flight. You want to run away, right? These are people with avoidant. Number 3 is fight. So you get aggressive, right? It's like, I want to fight back, bite back, and you get really reactive. And then appease is like you laugh or you try to push something off or whatever it is, and that can lead to someone having quite anxious attachment. So identifying and that's just something to know here, right? So it's like, this is how my nervous system works whenever I have my boundaries crossed. And it's really interesting because if you're in a state or a setting where it feels like your boundaries are being crossed all of the time, then your nervous system is always activated. You're less likely to recharge. You can go get a blood test and look at your bloods, and you'll find out that your recovery is a lot less. You'll find out that your hormones aren't optimized where you want them to be. You can measure this on an Oura ring or a tracking ring or a Whoop band, and you can tell the difference between when someone has healthy boundaries and when they don't. It's crazy out here. So identifying your default boundary response. So you want to ask yourself the questions to figure out for you which one your boundaries come under. Do you freeze? Do you avoid? Do you lash out? Or do you laugh and comply to make others feel comfortable? And depending on the boundary or the type of the scenario is really going to depend on you in regards to how you show up with your boundaries, how you react with your boundaries. Now, most of the time there will be one way that is the most normal that'll show up for you, but then there is quite a few that can happen where it's just specific scenarios where it's like you might get pushed and then lash out. Extremely common. So this is just something for you to think about, and it's interesting to know because it's like if you froze when you were a kid, likely you were conditioned to be disassociated. 2, if you avoid conflict, it's likely you were conditioned to run away when your boundaries are crossed, where you would hide in your room, run away from the kids at school, something like that. Lash out is when you need to fight for autonomy. So maybe your parents used to yell at you, or maybe they would come at you and you'd have to fight back in order to make something happen. Hopefully this is the only time. And did you laugh or comply to make others feel comfortable, where anytime something bad happens, you would have to make a joke to relieve the tension? If you're this kind of person in relationships, in business, in creating content, or when it comes to picking someone up, trying to go on a date, if you can't hold this tension, you'll notice that your eye contact moves away from the other person's more quickly. And then it comes across to the other people, you can't handle them. So if you're a male and this is on dates regularly and you'll find that the girls ghost you or you don't get the results that you want, most likely you're the jokester, but you can't hold the intimacy of what's required from maybe a woman on a date when she's testing you, which is really interesting. And boundaries is one of the core pillars that we use in masculine social dynamics within Set the Standard. Masculine social dynamics is the key to become magnetic, and boundaries is one of the key pillars. If you haven't got good boundaries, you get walked all over. It just makes you so much softer as a person. So we really want to have good, clear boundaries that we understand. And if we weren't brought up with these in a really healthy way, then we have to build them new for ourselves. A lot of leadership development and leadership coaching and training is all around teaching people how to use boundaries. So there's 2 types of boundaries: internal and external boundaries. So internal boundaries are when you compromise your own standards. So this is when you internally knew that someone's gossiping, and one of your values for yourself is to not to gossip, right? You don't want to gossip, and then you engage in the gossiping, right? So that is internal boundaries, where you've essentially crossed your boundaries yourself, right? You're not aligned with your values. So essentially anytime that you don't adhere to one of your values, you cross your own boundary. External enforcing boundaries, which is holding yourself accountable and resisting external pressure, right? So this is actually implementing your boundaries and stating them. Like in truth, let's say someone's really angry, hey, I don't want you to talk to me like that. Or you might be on a train or sitting next to someone on a bus and they start vaping or something weird, or vaping in your car. And you're like, hey, boundary of mine, do not vape in my car. Do not appreciate that at all. Vape outside in your own time. All right, so that would be a way of implementing a boundary externally. Here are some real world examples of boundary conditioning. Number one is personal space violations, which is the childhood example of parents walking into your room unannounced. Adult impact, now what happens is you feel uncomfortable when others invade your personal space, but you struggle to say anything. That's the moment where a lot of Australians do this, where you'll be angry about something or you'll see someone do something, and instead of going up to them and saying something or implementing a boundary, you don't want them to feel bad. And the reason you don't want them to feel bad is because you felt bad previously about having your boundaries crossed. And what happens is you've either appeased or you've done the fight or the flight thing. And because of that, you feel guilty saying no, or guilty rejecting other people. So instead of just putting in your boundary and not having to wear someone else's emotions, you just don't say anything, you shove it under the rug, and then you build up this resentment. Now what's funny is that emotions get stored in your body, right? They get stored in your nervous system. So when you build up all of this resentment, how is it going to come out, right? It's going to come out in aggression, in rage, in silence, in avoidance. Like, do you think that's crazy? No, it is. It's so insane in the best way. So the solution is to start asking for what you need. And when people start coming in, can you knock before entering in my room? Can you do this before this? Before you guys get into my car, just making sure that it's okay that no one vapes in here. And they go, sure, that's fine. This way, you're implementing your boundaries before you have to actually reject someone else. And this is just being aware of your preferences, and this is going to make you a better leader. This is going to make you a better facilitator around your friends, and this is going to make you someone more attractive to date. Wouldn't you agree? Right, so number two, emotional boundaries and over accommodation. So a childhood example is parents dismiss your emotions. No, stop crying, it's not a big deal, nothing's too bad, or whatever it is, which is disregarding how you feel. And the impact is how you struggle to set emotional boundaries, over explaining your feelings or suppressing them. So you can go one of the two ways if you've didn't get the opportunity to express emotional boundaries, and the over explaining is you always needed to talk about them and you're seeking for this validation from other people that you're okay. Or you suppress them by just not saying anything. Whoop, you withdraw and go quiet. The solution is when someone someone does not validate your emotions or invalidates them and disregards them, you say, I need to process this before responding. An example that I used is if one of my parents devalidate or invalidate how I'm feeling in the moment, is I just say, hey, I just needed to let you guys know this. I didn't need you to say anything. I didn't want you guys to ignore me. I just wanted you to validate how I was feeling about what I said. Or I'll preempt it.
My bad.
And the preempting, if I know that I need to be heard, is something along the lines of, hey, I just need to be heard from you right now. I don't need your advice or your opinion. I just want you to acknowledge how I'm feeling in this moment. And then you explain that, and you've just inserted a healthy boundary. Number three, over responsibility. This is wearing other people's emotions, not healthy. You were made responsible for And the next one is that you were made to feel responsible for your parents' emotions, which means your parents would say, oh, you're making me upset when you act like that. It makes mummy feel bad. You're making mummy angry. You're making dad upset. So any of those make you feel guilty for enforcing boundaries, fearing that you're going to upset other people. This is that no thing again. So the solution is to essentially remind yourself that you're not responsible for how others react to your boundaries and your emotions. Because the more that you take responsibility for that, the more that likely that you're going to wear out and burn out and just feel invisible, because you're essentially conditioning negative affirmations just over your mind and your nervous system. So, which is extremely important to know. The next thing I want to talk about here is this. There's how boundary comes from shame, and there's a model around this which shows from childhood where we were all shamed at some point, some way, somehow, because we were perceived it. And if it wasn't from our parents, it was from our peers, teachers, kids at school, or something else. And essentially, there's two different types of shame. And it's active abuse or quiet abuse, which we've sort of feel. And then in regards to not feeling shame, but feeling a sense of being in control, is when we're feeling calm or when we experience intimacy. So the opposite to active shame is intimacy, and the opposite to quiet abuse and quiet shame is a sense of feeling calm. So within the active abuse stage, that's any point where someone directly crossed your boundaries and you felt like, whoa, there was a moment here where someone crossed my boundaries and I didn't feel good about whatever it was. You got smacked inappropriately when you were a kid, you got yelled at by your parents, or you got pulled somewhere, or you got told off or name called by someone when you were younger. The quiet abuse is when people give you the cold shoulder, where people use avoidance strategies where they don't really say too much, but it's their body language where they know that that one got me, right? The opposite of that is basically we want to transition this through 4 different quadrants of these, and that is moving into being able to feel calm, being able to go, this is with interactions, I can have a therapeutic moment with someone within a relationship, which can make me calm down. And then the goal in the long run is to feel genuine intimacy with people, and the more that we can feel intimacy, because that's something that is so missing out in the modern dating world and the modern business world. Is a lot of people do want to succeed in their online business and Instagram personal brand. They want to make it in regards to wheeling and dealing in business, or they want to have a high quality relationship. But what's lacking, and I know this because I've done a bunch of retreats with men around Australia, sold out retreats and workshops, and what we see every single time when we ask people certain questions, what do they want to work on, what's holding them back, and we start working through mental and body language intelligence, every single time the main thing that's missing is always intimacy. And this has happened at every single retreat that I have run, which I found absolutely quite fascinating. So the goal of what boundaries helps you to have is way more intimacy. You feel less scared to lean in. You feel courage around saying something that you want to say, which is opening up in regards to vulnerability. And if you've ever wondered or watched someone who knows how to get vulnerable, you're like, wow, how do they get like that? Right? It's because they know how to be intimate with someone and they have the confidence to do so, which is fascinating. So in regards to this as well, in the shame and the boundaries, is it all has an impact on your HRV. And if you don't know what your HRV is, it is a common health KPI that is measured to determine your autonomic nervous system. So over weeks and months and days, you can tell whether your body is in a state of stress or a state of recovery. And it's done by basically every single morning. There's a measure that's done overnight or first thing in the morning, which will determine your HRV, and that'll basically tell you, how recovered you are. And if you've got a really high HRV, that means you can go crush it for the day. If you've got a really low HRV, you want to focus on recovering. But it's interesting because there is some science and evidence that backs this up. So essentially it says that if you've got strong boundaries, this signals to your nervous system that you've got safety, emotional regulation, your parasympathetic, which is your rest and digest nervous system, activates, and you have a sense of autonomy, then your HRV has an adaptive emotional regulation capacity, meaning that the stronger your boundaries you have, the safer that you feel, the more likely it is for your body to get into a rest and digest state. Isn't that nuts? Poor boundaries, which mean you have a low HRV, means you are more likely to have people pleasing, you trigger chronic stress, you're in a stress state or a sympathetic state all the time, and you have a feeling of a loss of self-agency. And if you don't have control in that, your HRV is directly linked with poor emotional regulation and stress vulnerability, which is, do you guys think this is nuts? And you have shame patterns. So shame patterns, which is self-abandonment, means your HRV is lower. So your shame is linked to the internal threat response. So your HRV will drop due to emotional regulations. So every time if you have a shame pattern, which is some sort of pattern that comes from not having strong boundaries from when you were a child, what happens is you're always perceiving that everyone around you, your relationships, people in your business, your clients are a threat. And it's like, well, there's a reason you're avoiding looking at your bank account. There's a reason why you haven't gone and spoken in front of camera. There's a reason why you haven't reached out to other people and you're just satisfied staying where you are, not releasing your full potential, is because your brain has now made a link to threat that has to be rewired, right? And that has science around that as well. And then to have a higher HRV, the key to get out of that is to speak your truth, be authentic, and be comfortable in saying no. Is that you? Right, wouldn't that be nice? So integrity-based behavior reduces stress load, increases the vagal tone, which is your vagus nerve, which is a part of your nervous system which connects from your spine to other areas in your body and your brain, and essentially dictates your stress load. And if you increase vagal tone, your nervous system is more likely to regulate, which means that comes from assertiveness and emotional clarity. And when you use that, improves your heart rate variability response, meaning that it's easier for you to get in a parasympathetic state, a rest and digest state, and allow your body to recover, right? just from implementing boundaries. This is why this is so important. So there's some questions to ask yourself to recognize if you have good or poor boundary conditioning is, were my boundaries respected as a child? How did my caregivers react when I said no as a child? Or people at school, peers? Did I feel safe asserting myself? How did my family handle personal space, emotions, and autonomy? And where was my privacy invaded? Mine was, I always got walked into my room. Just boom, we'd walk into my room and I'd be like, stop walking in my room, blah, blah, blah. So that for me was always a huge thing. And even now as an adult, anytime someone walks into my room, I get really reactive, which is just insane. So in regards to this, there are 4 domains of boundaries. And this is the last thing that I'll be teaching you guys, so hang on here because this is just some absolutely insane knowledge that I want you guys to understand, because it's going to help you in your life in a way that's just, you wouldn't believe possible until you, right? Once you have learned, you can't unlearn, right? Well, you can, but you guys get what I mean. So there are 4 different domains of boundaries: mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual. Mental is freedom of thought. Emotional is freedom of feeling. Physical is freedom of touch. Spiritual is freedom, feeling free in regards to your belief systems and your personal values. Emotional boundaries basically protect your right to feel and express emotions without guilt or manipulation. So an example would be someone's consistently invalidating your emotions or making you feel guilty for expressing them, and you can speak up. Mental boundaries protects your thoughts, opinions, and your beliefs. So an example of that is someone frequently disregards your ideas or puts pressure into you for their way of thinking. It's like, I'm not mentally free and I need to say, hey, this is the way that I want to think. Unless you've given someone permission. So if you have a coach or a mentor and you've given them permission to get into your mind to help adapt and change it, then there's a vulnerability piece to that, which is so powerful, which is where hypnosis comes and why coaching and mentoring are so important, because you can have someone come in, and if you like how their mind works and you like how their boundaries are and you like how their emotions are, get into my mind to help me reprogram what I've got so that I can start changing how I think, because it's limited right now, right? This is why it's so important, but you have to be careful around who you choose as a coach. Physical boundaries protects your personal space, body and physical interactions. So this is like if someone starts smoking in your car and you're like, get the hell out of there. So, or someone touching you without permission, standing too close, or just getting in your bubble in general. Spiritual boundaries protects your sense of purpose, values, and personal beliefs. So an example is someone ridiculing you or pressuring you to adopt their beliefs or their spiritual beliefs or their way of being is extremely unhealthy. So there's a process that I created which helped me be able to not only implement my boundaries, but be able to work through in my mind in real time how to get out of a state of trigger once my boundaries that I have perceived been crossed or maybe crossed, and completely get out of it, right? So for any of the mind, body, spirit, or emotional boundaries, the first thing that you want to do is notice, and you ask yourself the question, why am I triggered right now? And what boundary of mine has been crossed? And the second one we want to ask is, why am I grateful for this? We're going to have to lock in some times. The second point is, why am I grateful for this? Because when we experience gratitude, that helps us switch our mind from a negative sense to a positive sense, and then we can start attracting rather than feeling like something's pushing away, and you go, why am I grateful for this experience? I learned this lesson, it's made me stronger, there's some sort of benefit coming from it. The third one is, why was the boundary cross not for you? So this is like a chance to let some frustration out or to let some anger out, where it's like, okay, I notice what the trigger is, I'm super grateful for it, but I never want that to happen again. It's not for me. So what is it that I actually want? And you might notice that your boundaries getting crossed in a certain way, where it's like someone's being reactive at you, but what you want in the moment at that time is just a hug. Right? You might go, oh, what I want here is a hug. So when I notice this trigger, I notice that there's gratitude here, I notice that someone being reactive at me or raising their voice at me is so not for me, but what I want in the moment is just a hug. That can help you instead of you shutting down, not saying no, not wanting to, it makes you disconnect. Instead, you can start bringing in some intimacy into the playground. So let's say that happens between you and your partner. You would then come up to him after running through this space and you just explain, like, hey, I noticed that I was really triggered in that moment. I just want to appreciate you and appreciate the lessons and the learnings that we're going through right now. It's not for me, reactivity is so not for me, and I understand that in this moment, I just want a hug, and I understand that you probably want one as well. So if you want to talk again, anything off your chest, you can, but in this moment, to make me feel safe because I'm triggered at the moment, I'd really just like a hug from you. Right? So just being able to think about that in general, running through this is so insane. And you can do this for yourself even if you know that you're not going to speak to someone. So if you've been triggered, you're not going to see someone again, let's say someone at a cafe, you can think about this, right? You might notice that someone said something rude to you at a cafe. You've noticed the trigger, you've experienced gratitude for it. You know that, hey, you don't want to get treated like that again. It's like, what do you want? You want to have a pleasant interaction with someone. So the next time that you enter a cafe, you might have a different energy. You might be saying g'day, asking someone questions, actually genuinely connecting with someone, and may give you a way better experience to know, wow, what I wanted in that moment was genuine connection, right? And then the next time someone else crosses your boundary, you'll go, oh, I can go and get connection with anyone. I don't need to get it from this person, and it won't trigger you. Well, something that I would have got triggered in when I was coming to America was going through the boundary control or the border control. And I went up and gave the guy my passport, and I said, hey mate, how you doing? And he said, I'm not your mate. I just said that straight at me, and I ended up just laughing. I thought it was funny. And then I was like, oh, sorry, it's an Australian thing. And he's like, well, we're not in Australia. And I was like, fair enough. They just gave me my passport, and quite cheekily, accidentally, I was like, all right, thanks mate, and walked off. But just in regards, previously that would have really affected me, and then I just thought it was funny. So there's a difference between now understanding and running through this process multiple times, that it's conditioned my brain to understand boundaries. So essentially for you, just want to ask yourself some questions and get clear. It's just, as a child, were you allowed to express anger or frustration? Or have you ever dismissed someone else's emotions before? For mental boundaries, did people respect your thoughts and opinions growing up? Or have you also ever pressured someone to think the way you do, right? Have your physical boundaries when you were younger, were you given personal space as a child? And have you also ever walked into someone else's personal space without asking? Without knocking on the door, right? Or spiritual boundaries, were you allowed to explore your own beliefs, be creative with your mind as a kid? And have you also ever made someone feel bad for their beliefs and having them unconsciously, or making them feel guilty? So if you've done any of those and understand, oh, there's a little bit of a juice there, there's a little bit of work to do here, which after watching this, there should be a little bit of work, right? That's completely normal to have, is to get a little bit excited to start working on these, because the crisper that you get on these and the more available you can do with this, you become so much more free. And instead of forcing and repelling and pushing away, you start attracting and bringing towards you, which is everything that we want. You become more confident, you're better at saying no, you're way less likely to be rejected from other people, you become more magnetic, and opportunities just come your way. So if you like this video, please subscribe. If you want to learn this and dive in it a little bit deeper, we coach in this on my men's coaching community called Set the Standard. We have a quiz that you can take because we're doing a 7-day challenge by the time you're listening to this video. So have a look to see if it's there. You can either join or do the challenge. Click the link below, click the link up, and I'll see you guys on the inside. Big love.